Kaleidoscope, the American psych folk band led by David Lindley, had a sound so far ahead of its time that mainstream audiences simply didn't know what to do with it. Their 1968 track Banjo is a perfect example. Blending rock, folk, and Middle Eastern influences, it was a wild ride of sounds that could have easily sat alongside the Byrds or Jefferson Airplane on the charts. The song kicks off with Lindley's string wizardry, pulling you into a world where bluegrass collides with psychedelic experimentation. At its heart, Banjo was playful yet deeply musical, a showcase of virtuosity wrapped in a rock package. Unfortunately, Kaleidoscope was always a step outside the mainstream. While bands like The Doors dominated the charts, Kaleidoscope was making music that challenged expectations rather than fitting neatly into them. In hindsight, that very refusal to conform is what makes Banjo timeless. It's quirky, experimental, and refreshingly different from the era's predictable hits. If more listeners had caught on in 1968, it might have rewritten the story of American psychedelic rock. Today, Banjo feels like a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered, a reminder that innovation doesn't always equal commercial success. The Pretty Things were always caught in the shadow of the Rolling Stones, even though they pushed boundaries far harder than Jagger and Richards ever dared in the late 60s. Their 1968 single, Defecting Grey, is one of the most daring pieces of psychedelic rock to come out of the UK scene. Produced by Norman Smith, who had worked with Pink Floyd, the track is a wild, fragmented collage that jumps between hard rock, pastoral folk, and pure acid freakout. It's chaotic, disorienting, and completely fascinating, a song that mirrors the LSD-fueled experimentation of the time. What kept it from being a hit? Probably the very thing that makes it brilliant. It refused to stay in one lane. While listeners were embracing songs like Hello, I Love You or White Room, Defecting Grey was too strange, too unpredictable for radio. But in many ways, it foreshadowed the progressive rock explosion of the early 70s. The Pretty Things may not have reached the fame of their contemporaries, but this song shows they were among the boldest sonic explorers of their era. Listening now, it's shocking that it didn't break bigger. It's the sound of 1968 at its most daring. Boston's Ultimate Spinach was part of the so-called Bosstown Sound, a marketing attempt to rival San Francisco's psychedelic scene. While the hype may have hurt them in the long run, it doesn't take away from the brilliance of tracks like Your Head is Reeling. This 1968 song is dark, swirling, and hypnotic, with fuzzy guitars and eerie vocals that feel like a descent into the psychedelic subconscious. Unlike the happy, flower power vibe of many 60s hits, Ultimate Spinach leaned into the paranoia and shadows of the era. Your Head is Reeling wasn't just a song, it was an atmosphere drenched in reverb and menace. Had it received more exposure, it might have rivaled the darker psychedelia of The Doors or Iron Butterfly. Instead, critics dismissed Ultimate Spinach as a manufactured band, and much of their catalog was overlooked. But for listeners today, the song holds up as one of the most compelling and underrated pieces of 1968 psychedelia. It proves that the Bosstown Sound wasn't just hype. There were real gems hidden in there, and Your Head is Reeling is one of the best. When Spirit released their debut album in 1968, they were unlike any other American band. With jazz-trained drummer Ed Cassidy, teenage guitar prodigy Randy California, and frontman Jay Ferguson, they mixed rock, jazz, blues, and psychedelia in ways no one else dared. Their song Fresh Garbage stood out immediately. Built around an irresistible riff, the track was both funky and menacing, with lyrics critiquing consumer wastefulness, a surprisingly forward-thinking theme in 1968. Spirit had the chops and the originality, but they never broke through to mainstream superstardom, often overshadowed by bigger names on the West Coast. Fresh Garbage should have been a hit because it was accessible while still innovative. The groove was tight, the playing superb, and the message timely. Yet instead of becoming a counterculture anthem, it remained a cult favorite. Over time, its influence has quietly spread. Led Zeppelin famously borrowed ideas from Spirit's style, but in 1968 it didn't get the recognition it deserved. Today, Fresh Garbage still feels relevant both musically and lyrically, and it's hard not to imagine what might have been had it climbed the charts back then. Moby Grape is one of rock's great what-if stories. In 1967, they released one of the finest debut albums of the era, but legal troubles, poor management, and bad timing sabotaged their career. By 1968, they released the biting bluesy rocker Murder in My Heart for the Judge, a song dripping with frustration over authority and injustice. With blistering guitars and soulful delivery, it had all the makings of a hit. But Moby Grape's name was already tarnished by lawsuits and mishandled promotion. While bands like Creedence Clearwater Revival were breaking into the mainstream, Moby Grape was sinking despite having songs just as strong, if not stronger. Murder in My Heart for the Judge is raw, Passy says. Ornate and completely relatable, especially in the turbulent climate of 1968. Unfortunately, it never got the airplay it deserved. Today, the song stands as a reminder of just how much potential was squandered with Moby Grape. It should have been blasting from car radios and jukeboxes, but instead, it became one of rock's great hidden treasures. Technically released in late 1966, the Electric Prunes' I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night was reissued and circulated again in 1968, right at the height of the psychedelic wave. The song's fuzzed-out guitar, trembling vocals, and surreal lyrics made it a perfect fit for the era. It was one of the first mainstream flirtations with psychedelic sound, and yet despite becoming a cult classic, it never fully crossed over into the big hit category. By 1968, it should have been rediscovered by a wider audience alongside songs like In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida. The Electric Prunes were experimental, daring, and deeply in tune with the psychedelic zeitgeist, but they lacked the consistent promotion and stability of bigger acts, and their catalog was often overshadowed. I Had Too Much to Dream remains one of the best examples of garage psych fusion, a song that could have been massive if only timing and circumstances had been kinder. The United States of America, an experimental rock band led by Joseph Byrd, only released one self-titled album in 1968, but it's considered a masterpiece of avant-garde psychedelia. The opening track, The American Metaphysical Circus, is one of the strangest and most fascinating songs of the year. Mixing electronic noise, carnival sounds, and Grace Slick-style vocals, it was completely unlike anything else in rock at the time. It should have been huge simply for its boldness and originality. But mainstream audiences weren't ready for such a surreal and challenging soundscape. While Jefferson Airplane pushed the boundaries, the United States of America blew them apart, and that may have been their downfall commercially. Still, the track predicted much of what would come in experimental rock and even electronic music. In 1968, it was too weird to climb the charts, but in retrospect, it feels like an essential missing link in rock's evolution. Clear Light was a short-lived Los Angeles psychedelic band, but their song Black Roses deserves far more recognition. With its haunting lyrics, moody organ, and heavy guitar lines, it was darker and heavier than much of what was on the radio in 1968. In many ways, it anticipated the rise of gothic and doom rock. The track carried a theatrical quality, almost like early Doors, but with more menace. Unfortunately, Clear Light was plagued by lineup changes and poor promotion, so their music never reached a wide audience. Black Roses should have been a hit because it captured the darker side of the late 60s counterculture, a sound that audiences didn't fully embrace until Black Sabbath and others came along a couple years later. Before Jeff Lynne went on to form Electric Light Orchestra, he fronted a quirky Birmingham band called the Idle Race. Their 1968 track, The Skeleton and the Roundabout, was a whimsical, surreal slice of psychedelic pop that had all the ingredients of a hit. With playful lyrics, strange imagery, and inventive arrangements, it fit right in with the era's fascination for the whimsical. Think early Pink Floyd or the Beatles' Magical Mystery Tour. Yet, despite critical praise, the song never charted. The Idle Race remained a cult band, but The Skeleton and the Roundabout is proof of Lynne's early genius. Looking back, it's shocking that it didn't take off. It was catchy, weird, and utterly unique, the kind of song that could have easily stood alongside Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on the radio. Instead, it became one of rock's hidden gems.